Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Which one comes first? Does the type of housing we build affect the number of kids people have, or does the number of kids people have affect the type of housing we build? A new study has found that in countries where parents have smaller children, housing is not as big of an issue. Experts say that having smaller kids can actually lead to fewer bedrooms being required, lower living expenses, and lower pains during childbirth. The same study also found that American children tend to be larger, and this has led to suburban sprawl, declining birth rate, diabetes, and general cultural deterioration. While these factors may not be interlinked, they are worth considering when buying real estate, creating rental units, and developing housing in a culture where the large family is under attack. This time, we also talk missing middle housing, fake executive orders, combating NIMBYs, and condominiumizing houseplexes. To get in touch with the show, visit twostewards.ca. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but is valuable for listening, amusement purposes. Now, let's find some housing for your growing kids.
Well, speaking of slightly tasteless jokes,
we're back again.
We've had an election, and people are finding out what Mark Carney's really all about.
So what's he all about?
Not what he said, I'll tell you that much. So I think we actually want to talk about the missing middle, but I just got a few things to get off my chest. And you know what? So I was pretty downcast with the election results, and I'm not so much anymore. Like, we just have it's a bunch of incompetent boobs. I don't know what else to say, like our cabinet. But, you know, it's like the same cabinet that we had, but shuffled around. And, like, it is what it is, because those are they're not going to put a bunch of backbenchers in, right? So we've got, what's his face? The new Attorney General. He was the housing, Sean Fraser.
Yeah.
Right? First, he completely blew up immigration, then housing. And, now he's rewarded with the Attorney General position. But anyways, I mean, like we get what we wanted, right?
He looks a little bit like J.D. Vance, but not as intimidating.
I bet you he's a softie, J.D. Vance. Wait, was he in the Marines?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, probably. I have to watch that movie yet. Hillbilly Elegy. It was about J.D. Vance's upbringing.
Okay, yeah. J.D. Vance is doing a talk at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas.
Oh, really?
I understand. That's next week. So this will be coming out right around then.
Okay.
And this is usually the big hype fest for Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are, I think, I don't know. I don't think as many people that we might know are going in certain circles, right?
No.
To the Bitcoin conference. There's other ones. But anyways, I know there's a bunch of TGFB Bitcoiners getting together there. So one year we'll do it.
Yeah,
but,
we'll go there.
Anyways, I'm pro hillbilly. I'll just say that in case you didn't guess. Okay, but one thing I just wanted to mention amidst all the disappointment of the Liberal election win. And you know what? If you're a conservative, like if you're in the Conservative Party or whatever, you know what? Maybe, don't be too disappointed, right? Because the economy, like, things are not looking good. And it's like whoever is in power, I don't know. I thought this last time, but whoever's in power for the next while is going to get lambasted, I think, because the economy just, in my opinion, it's going to get worse and worse, right? All the signs are that we're headed for recession, maybe a pretty bad recession. But so there's a little comfort there, I guess, right? You won't get blamed that.
What was the word we were talking about last year was vibicession. Remember that? Vibicession? I don't know. Was that Freeland or whoever that came up from?
There's so many
fearless leaders. Just vibicession.
Dumb, ridiculous things that we've all forgotten about.
Yeah.
Right? From the sort of the Trudeau era, all this ridiculous stuff that people are like, oh, no, like it's just memory hold, right?
Yeah.
Like the tariffs. So remember, elbows up, right? We were laughing at that and making fun of them. And, but this was the whole thing, right? We got to be aggressive and defend ourselves, and Carney's the man to do it, right? And so he met with Trump. I think it was April 15th. And, so sort of in the lead up to the election. And April 16th, meeting with cabinet, and they're like, we're dropping all these tariffs. So they didn't announce that to anybody, right? It was announced eventually, I think May the 7th, the day that it was effective, because all government stuff has to be announced in, what is it? The Gazette, Canadian Gazette or something. It's like a publication that
like
exists.
An interesting publication.
Well, because I guess, all government decisions have to be announced somewhere, or like put in the press. So that's how they do it. But nobody reads that. And nobody reported on this, because now they're saying like, oh no, that was public knowledge. Like he mentioned it, like for sure. It's like nobody that I talked to knew about this. And like people who were on the sort of elbows up side, right? They were like buying into it and like, we got to get Carney in their elbows up, yada, yada. So like, don't tell me that anybody knew about this. And even if you did mention it at some point, it was included in their budget platform, right? Remember they made fun of the Conservatives for their unrealistic and whatever budget that they presented, or the platform. So there was $20 billion in tariff revenue in the Liberal budget platform.
And now there's no tariffs for that revenue.
Well, but they knew at that time that they were dropping the tariffs. Like almost all the tariffs. They knew that. And they still had the 20 billion. So for people who are saying like, oh no, he didn't, like, no, he lied.
Yeah. So short answer is you can trust him to fix the economy, or?
Well, they can't possibly get a budget together, right? So we're going to be without a budget for like a year or more, right? And people are like, oh no, there's an election and a change. Like, I don't care. It's still a Liberal Party. Like, you really? And the whole premise of this was that Carney's such a experienced banker in financial matters. Like, really, he can't get a budget together, or even like a outline of one or something. Like, the government has to keep running.
Yeah,
so they have to get money from somewhere. How do you operate without a budget?
You mostly just copy paste last year and tweak a few things, right? Like,
well, I mean, people are a little bit up in arms about the spending that's being authorized by the Governor General, and there's no accountability. But I mean, this is like a measure that just to keep the government going is allowed, whatever. So I think that's a little bit overblown. But it's like, we're going to do this for like, what, a whole year? Where there's like zero transparency, zero accountability. But I mean, Carney started out the campaign lying. There's a number of lies that he was caught in. And so I don't know, why anybody thought that it would be any different once he was elected. We got like pipelines. I don't know if you heard this. Stephen Guilbeault was like, oh no more pipelines. We have Trans Mountain that we bought and it's operating at 40% capacity, and demand for oil is going down anyways worldwide, right? All of which is like not true. You could even say some people might call it a lie. I didn't say that. Other people said it. So it's a really bad Trump impression. But it's like, no, Trans Mountain's operating at 80% capacity. Demand for oil is going up. And you're just an environmental terrorist and a liar. But it also contradicts what Carney has said about, we need more pipelines and, see. Anyways, you got a bunch of these cabinet ministers contradicting each other, and
it's hard when you try to please everybody, right? You try to please they're trying to please Trump, probably, right? Go meet with him, come back, and we got to make these changes because we got to please the U.S. and then try and please all the different voting groups and whatever, right? Yeah,
I think deep down, Carney knows what has to happen, like, which he did, right? He dropped the tariffs against the U.S. Like, we can't. Like, it's a no-win situation. So I think he's a pragmatist. And then he also knows, like, we need a pipeline. We need to, like, we need money. Let's get natural resources flowing. But he's maybe having some trouble reining in members of his own caucus. But at the end of the day, like, pretty obvious what we got to do, right? We're painted into a corner.
So if there's
especially with bond auctions.
Okay, what's going on with that?
So this doesn't get a lot of press, like, generally, because, like, it's bonds, it's boring, whatever.
I mean, it's on our podcast, but
so that's a lot of press. No, but like this is the people think of they talk about the market, right? Which is the stock market. And then I think we've mentioned this before, but when you compare like the stock market to the bond market, the bond market is the dog and the stock market is the tail, right? People talk about the tail that wags the dog, right? Or these analogies. This is probably really confusing for people, but the bond market is where
I'm
the
following
real...
you, so I think most people can follow you there, Mark.
Oh, so that reminds me. We quick aside. I know we said this would be quick, but it never is, and we will get to the other content. But our dog was expecting her. She's female, and she was, she met with her friend and got pregnant. So she was expecting, and we went down to the States for just for a weekend, half a weekend. And she was due maybe a couple of days after we came back. But sure enough, we're down there, and she runs up, and she's like, "Rrr," got her tail down. I'm like, oh, I think she's going into labor. So sure enough, we had puppies in the States.
So they are U.S. citizens.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Like, can
you
we
get
claim U.S. citizenship for them? Like,
or
and then
for
can
you,
we
as a doggy dad or whatever they call it?
Exactly.
You're a boomer. You're not a millennial. Millennial, you could, but boomer, no.
Okay.
No, you got to bring an avocado toast and just be standing there like, look, okay, I'm a doggy dad.
So,
I can't afford one of those $5 million golden tickets or whatever they are.
Oh yeah, that's right. Willy Wonka. Anyways, so then we had to like leave the next day with three puppies, and so all the kids are like, "Oh, we can," we're like, "Kids, just maybe don't say anything at the border, okay? Like, let Dad talk to the border guy, because the kids always have something to say. Like, they'll just tell them about
why do you have a gun?
This rock. Yeah, look at this rock I found. Hey, we were in a forest and I saw a bird, and the guy's like." Yeah, get out of here. Yeah. But anyways, everybo's very nervous about the puppies. We're like, just don't say anything, guys. Okay, no questions.
Grass-fed butter and citrus.
But we made it across the border with
good. It's always nerve-wracking,
contraband puppies. Yeah. Anyways, that I don't know what my original point was, but what were we talking about?
Elbows
Tariffs?
up. But needless to say, if you're a dentist and you were expecting that there would be more business because of all the elbows ramming into people's teeth, that's not going to happen. The tariffs are gone.
I don't know. They expanded the Canada dental benefit or whatever. So
Really?
that was the plan. So they've done that. I mean, I've heard that there's huge wait times and lots of denied things.
If we're in a recession, at least people can look nice when they smile. They're not going to be smiling anyways. So.
No, nobody will. One or two other things on Carney, like these fake executive orders got to stop. I don't know if you've seen the photo ops where he's like, I'm signing a new bill into... It's like, that's not how we do it in Canada. Like, it goes to Parliament and... oh, sorry, getting emails here. It goes to Parliament, gets voted on, and then, whatever, receives royal assent. It's not you signing this thing like Trump. Like, you're a Trump wannabe. Stop it. Anyways, just, it's optics. But one of my favorite moments was the Minister of Housing.
Just on that, it's optics, but like if I didn't see it, so I don't know what kind of optics it is. Because I didn't see it, so.
Well, maybe you need to watch more mainstream media.
Yeah, well...
Or
I leave that to you. You bring it here. I learn about it here.
Well, or just be on X where people are criticizing. But yes, aren't you glad you have me in your life?
Yeah, it's a dynamic duo.
You're the only one. Anyways, the Minister of Housing, I think, is Gregor Robertson, who's mayor of Vancouver. Specifically during a time when house prices skyrocketed in Vancouver. We can't blame it all on him, but a little bit, because a lot of that was Chinese drug money and a lot of information coming out about this, by the way, the fentanyl and all that stuff. We won't get into it now, but there's FBI is coming out with a lot of numbers, making it look pretty embarrassing for Canada. Anyways,
so if that's what's propping up the house prices over there, and to some extent everywhere, I guess, but is the illegal activity, and the Liberals don't want the prices to come down. Like I get the sense they don't want to, upset boomers or people who have a house and that's their retirement, right? Like,
or drug launderers.
They don't want to upset anybody who's a clientele of their country.
Don't upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
No. I don't know. We should maybe get Sam Cooper back on again.
Yeah.
Talk about that. But anyways, a reporter asked the housing minister in a scrum, like, what do you think about house prices? Do they need to come down? And he said no. Right? We need more supply. But so is that just the new minister?
As an owner of real estate, I would agree with him. Right? So this is where all the votes come from. It's the people who own the houses and who think that, okay, we make more supply to make it more affordable for everyone else, but you don't want the pricing down. Well, how does that... You can't have your cake and eat it too, right?
Exactly. How does that work?
Yeah.
What will more supply do?
It'll make that price go down.
Make the price. The only way it's more affordable is the price goes down, or people's wages go up.
That's right.
But listening to somebody recently, they're like, you would need 40 years for that wage gap to come back, right? To 2 to 3 times, 2 to 3 times earnings, or even 4 to 5, right? Because some places are up to 14x.
Yeah.
And I should give a shout out. I think that was Joseph Barbudo. He was on the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast.
All right.
And
long-time listener, no-time caller? Or?
I don't know if he was on there before or not, but no, he is on X, if you want to follow him. The Economic Long-Wave Theorist, I guess, is his... I don't even know if he has any posts, but he has a Substack and stuff. Anyways, we've talked about fourth turning, and we talked a little bit about Kondratiev waves and Elliott wave cycles. So he's more into the long wave or the Kondratiev wave. And so it's a similar idea as I won't get into it, similar idea to the fourth turning.
I was just going to ask you to get into it because I don't know what that is.
We don't have that much time.
Okay. All right.
No, but it's a similar way of looking at like macro time frames, and so maybe like a 60 to 80 year time frame. And anyways, he's saying like we're in the end of this Kondratiev wave, this long wave, and it coincides with what we've been saying about the fourth turning as well, and how we're going to be into a winter it's like spring, summer, fall, winter. And winter is typically the like a deleveraging and when the debt that has built up in the system kind of implodes.
Why do we always get the pain, man? Like one thing
I know
after
we should have
next.
been born in the 40s.
Yeah,
when we had the good times. But anyways, that's
you had to go
interesting
outside
podcast.
to your outhouse to go to the bathroom, but other than that,
hey, I just built a bed for vegetables, so. We're starting a little homestead in the city.
Hillbilly. You said you're pro hillbilly, so
yes, I am.
So you're channeling your inner hillbilly there.
I'm working on it. Firearms license is next. So, anyways, the Liberals are saying housing prices do not need to come down. And you were just at the Missing Middle Summit, so talking about building, right? And how do we? Without dropping prices, how do we get more housing? I mean, so we can... Okay, sorry. One more thing before you get into it. The city of Hamilton built 80... they call them temporary shelters, like essentially tiny homes or shipping container things or whatever, right? On a plot of land in Hamilton. And so for 80 of them, the budget was $2.6 million or something. What do you guess the final bill was?
Oh, shoot.
Come on. Let's play higher or lower.
Maybe 3 million.
You are low, sir.
Oh, shoot.
Go higher.
4 million.
You're low.
Really? Oh. All right. So, is this an exponential chart?
Almost.
Should we just add a zero?
$7.8 million was the final bill. And one of the big...
So this is a lesson for people who ever have to quote government contracts. Just quote them low, get the job, upcharge, increase, inflate.
100%.
And you're going to get, If you're quoting them at what they're worth, you're not going to get the job.
No. And I was talking about somebody about this the other day, about the triple P, like public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
Like that's been the model forever. right? You just quote it low and then you just hammer them with extras as you go through the project. And because it's government, they're going to pay, right? Yeah. You can't get away with that with a private contract, but government, yeah, they'll do it. Anyway, so these homes...
reiterating the fact that you need hard assets in your life because...
Or a government contract.
Or... All right.
So anyways, one of the big ticket items for the this cost overrun was at least $1 million to rewire the electrical in these units and to add more heaters because they weren't suitable for Canadian winters. Like, really? Nobody could have foreseen this? And it's at City Hall, and they're talking about it. And one councillor, I think, was getting pretty upset. But everybody else is like, well, as a learning, we've learned from this. And blah. It's like, really? It cost you almost triple?
That's because everybody's immigrated here recently and has never been through a winter, Mark. Like...
Oh, man, I don't know if it was Peterborough or something, where some guy got a contract and... again, for these tiny homes, temporary shelters, he bought them off, I think, Alibaba for like $6,000 and charged the government. It was either $26,000 or $43,000. I've heard two different stories, but the one I saw recently was like $26,000 each for like nothing. He had them drop shipped to site, and it was like, there you go, guys, and they were like garbage, right?
Yeah.
Like, big surprise. So anyways, just on the whole plan of the Carney government to put in 500,000 homes, and it's going to cost whatever amount you think it's going to cost for whatever they're going to build, it's going to be way more. So like, this is going to be a ton of, in addition to all the deficit spending they've talked about, if they're going to do this, like money printing galore.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say about that.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
Bring it on. But what can normal people like you and I do, Brent, to address the housing crisis?
Cry. So I did attend the Missing Middle Summit. This is put on by the folks at Buildstak. So I'm not super familiar with them in particular, but I ended up going there and checking it out. So this is
about housing, right? Not exercise?
Yeah.
Because I do not have a missing middle.
Nothing to do with losing weight. I know you wanted to get something off your chest, but every time you get it off your chest, it kind of goes down to the middle. So
exactly,
this podcast might not be the best for you. Get it off your chest, and it just adds. So missing middle, basically housing that is between single-family detached homes, single-family homes to apartment buildings. Right, we have a lot of infrastructure in Canada that is kind of one of those two categories. And, you see different waves of construction throughout the last 50 years, right? And one era they're building, like we talked about when they're building apartment buildings, right? A lot more frequently. And then, single family home construction is it's come down. Like the housing starts and the amount of single family homes just with affordability, with availability of land, right? But what's interesting is in the city of Toronto, they have like the yellow belt. I don't know if we've talked about this, but
yellow belt?
Yeah, they kind of call it the yellow belt because I guess the zoning color for single family zoning was yellow on the map or whatever. So it's kind of like this idea that
not because bananas grow there.
No. Okay. But just over decades of having like exclusively single family zoned areas in the city, you have a lot of low density areas, and then you have these like concentrated areas where there's high rise buildings, and you don't really have anything in between. So that's what they call the missing middle, right? Yeah. So maybe people aren't familiar with it. That's kind of a high level description of it, but maybe you've heard of it before. And essentially it's like duplex, triplex, fourplex, five, whatever, right? And then started getting into these multiplexes where you can go multi-stories, but they're kind of stick framed. So they're framed with wood. They're easy construction to build. You can build them like a lot faster than, getting out the concrete and the steel and digging a parking garage and then building a condo tower, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why is this happening now? Because like, if you go to other areas in the world, even in the States, pockets in Canada too. Like I think Vancouver's a little bit more ahead of the curve. Toronto's probably behind. Like definitely talking about bigger cities, right? Because we're talking about density, but
of which we have like 2 or 3.
Yeah, we have two or three cities. So.
Well, big
enough where density is like a big major concern.
Yeah.
But like there's models that work in other places around the world where a lot of the housing infrastructure is not single family homes, right? It's, we've talked about Europe where kind of the model is these more dense kind of 3-story, 4-story buildings where you kind of have a flat, right?
Yeah.
And you're a tenant, or maybe you families own that and you've passed it down. And that's just kind of the lifestyle. That's kind of been accepted. But here in Toronto, because of the restricted zoning, like they couldn't build this stuff. So now all of a sudden, I think it was 2023. They kind of introduced or modified the zoning to allow for 4+1, basically, or 5 units as of right on a residential lot throughout Toronto. And other cities, like this is the Ontario legislation, I think it was Bill 23 that came through. And, we've talked about doing up to 3 residential units or 3 dwelling units on any residential lot in Ontario. Well, okay, that's like a big change, right?
Yeah.
If it's single family home, now all of a sudden 3 developers can look at this differently. And it's a bit of an impact on culture too, right? Like housing formations. That's kind of where we want to go with this. But some things that I learned,
yeah. So let me just say, I don't know why, but actually I probably know why, but I keep getting these ads on, maybe it's probably Facebook for like Italian villas, right? But you'll see it and you're like, whoa, it's like 100,000 euros or whatever. But when you actually look into it, it's like a flat in this like, an old farmhouse or an old castle or whatever in Italy, in Tuscany somewhere, right? I mean, it's still really cool.
To buy?
To buy. So it's like a little apartment within this larger building, and maybe some of the outside areas are common areas and are shared, but then you get like this 2-bedroom flat in the thing, but it's totally normal. Right?
Yeah.
It's like this integrated property, a historic thing, but you're just buying a little piece of it.
Would that, for example, would that be a place where we can raise a family?
Like there are bigger ones, right? But it's also, I think, that European model that you're not used to. Like, well, I have 4 kids, or 3 kids, I need a 4-bedroom house, right? They don't have mostly don't have big families there anyways, but like just smaller spaces in general. Yeah, like a lot of the ones I've seen are like, 1 or 2 bedrooms. 3-bedroom is like a little harder to find. And then when you do, it's a lot more expensive. But maybe that's, we don't have any castles here, but harbinger of things to come, maybe. Anyways, it's they got the middle figured out there.
Well, what we have going on in Toronto, like everybody knows about this condo crisis, right? Where we've kind of overbuilt condos, and like all these places that were selling at the peak a couple years ago, and everybody was just lining up to speculate. And I don't want to point any fingers, but they say like, hey, I'm going to take 3 or 4 of those. Yeah. Or whatever. They're going to pay. And you couldn't get one of these things. They're just selling like crazy. Right. And then now, so like that is, like those are before they're built. So now they're trying to build these things, and the price have come down significantly, and like people aren't closing on them. But like, I think a lot of those units, and then there's now obviously a purpose-built rental wave that has come through, and there's a lot more rental units out there. But like those units, they're not necessarily very appealing to a family, right? They're not suitable to.
No, they're 1-bedroom or studios, right?
Yeah, so most of them are like bachelor apartment, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, like 3-bedroom, pretty rare. And you would say like 3-bedroom units are still in demand. Like generally speaking, if you have a 3-bedroom, you can find some family looking for a spot. Whereas it's the young professionals who are a bit more mobile, and when the market downturn, like a family's more stable, right? Long term, they're committed, they have income. Oftentimes it's two incomes.
You haven't met my family.
Yeah. Oh, you guys like to go against the grain. This is
we do
the hillbilly thing all over again.
Exactly.
But yeah, like young professional, like, okay, well, the economy's changing a little bit. Maybe I got to go over here to work, and they're a little bit more transient. And so, anyways, the missing middle category is interesting because people are priced out of the single family home market, especially in Toronto, bigger cities, and they don't want to live in an apartment building, right? So there's kind of like this hole, this missing part of the market, this gap that needs to be filled where like I want a place to live. I want it to be close to my park, close to my school, close to my grocery store, my community where I grew up or whatever, where my family is, my friends. I don't want to be in that tower. I want to have access to some yard space and just kind of that lifestyle. But the infrastructure that's built, like there's just not really options. So the city realizes this, municipalities realize this, the province, like it's kind of everything is aligning now to make these developments more feasible. So that's really interesting. And it's kind of, I want to say new, like obviously this has been around forever and people have been doing this type of housing, but it's become more financially viable now and the zoning permits it. And there's kind of like, an avenue for development that didn't exist before.
Well,
so
even the
a lot
term
of investors.
Missing middle, like you maybe 5 years ago you heard it if you're in sort of the real estate space, but maybe it's 3 years ago that just wasn't even a big concept for a lot of people. Like, basement apartment, ADUs as a way to sort of maximize. But now it's like, wow, this is almost a necessity, right? Now, when you say like there's more opportunities to develop, are you're not talking about like building from scratch, are you? Or are you talking about densifying existing homes?
This is the thing, right? It's missing middle. It kind of implies that it's infill. So it's not like you're going out into the countryside and building 5-plexes in a row, right? What you're doing is you're taking existing land that is like was historically all zoned single family homes where there's a ton of demand. People want to live on the subway line. They want to live close to their job or whatever. And you're repurposing it to a much higher and better use, right? So in many cases, you're either taking the single family home and either demolishing it entirely or at least demolishing everything above grade and building up, 3 stories. Depending on the architectural design of this thing and who your end buyer, like if it's a purpose-built rental, that's one thing. If it's going to be condominiumized and sold, that's the other thing, right? You can take these 4-unit buildings and condominiumize them.
Yeah, interesting.
So now it's a single building. It's kind of like a mini condo, right? But now if I'm a homeowner or like I'm an aspiring first-time home buyer, let's say, in the city of Toronto, and, I want access to my own home as like a place where I can live, raise my family, be in the community I want, and start building some equity, like a floor or like a section of one of these multiplex buildings is like a great way to get in, right? And a lot of times the condo fees are like negligible because it's not like a big complex with a lot of maintenance. You just kind of own a little, like a townhouse, right?
Yeah, it might be a shared roof that you got to worry about or whatever. Did they talk about financing for these? Like how are banks with, the banks get it?
Oh, the banks always 10 steps ahead.
You're right. Forward thinking Canada.
No, they already canceled this program. So no, so the big thing I think in the investor community is the CMHC MLI Select Financing Program. Yeah. Right. Where you can access kind of limited recourse loans with longer amortizations. You have to kind of meet their criteria, but basically get access to more money, higher loan to value, and keep your payments low. So from an investor's perspective, that's like a great opportunity, right?
No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the potential buyers.
But the potential buyers for
I want to buy a quarter of a house, Mr. Bank. Like,
yeah. So that's basically like, it's just a condo sale, right? At the end of the day. So it's is similar to just buying a condo in a building, but now it's a different type of infrastructure, right? Like you can have a lot more square footage. So some of these things, like I think, so they did a monitoring program of all the different permits that have been issued for the last like couple years since inception, kind of this program. And I took some notes because I was kind of interested. So far 452 permits. I think it's 222 of those were multiplex. So the other,
so this is Toronto?
This is Toronto.
Okay.
Proper. So the other 250 of those or whatever was like duplex, triplex, but like 4-unit, 5-unit buildings. So it's 222. So that resulted in 1,300 units in total, and or 726 net new, because sometimes they're taking a building and they're converting it,
duplex,
right? So So, but the average unit size is 1,140 square feet. So over 1,100 square feet. So that's what was astounding, right? You think about Toronto, and this is we're talking about Toronto, like you might not be from Toronto, you might not be interested in Toronto, you might never been to Toronto, but it's the biggest city in Canada. So it has implications for everywhere else. And I think what happens here, other cities can look at and model after too, right? Yeah. So if this is kind of what they're spearheading, like you could see this happening in other jurisdictions around, down the road. So, but 1,140 square feet for a unit. So just to give the context for somebody that might not know square footage, but like that's like a really healthy 3-bedroom home. 3-bed, 2-bath.
I think I'm just over 900 square feet in our house on the floor plate. Yeah. And that's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, kitchen, living room on the main floor. Yeah. With closets and stuff. And so 1,140 is like, especially when you compare it to the condos that everybody's panic selling now, which are like 500 square feet or something like that, right? Yeah. 400, depending.
Yeah, exactly. And the condos have their place because like they are cheap and they have the amenities, right? Like they have kind of the advantage of having all these units paying for like certain group of amenities. But if you value the neighborhood and the proximity to the ground, well, proximity to reality. Let's just I don't know. I don't know why I'm so opposed to condos, but like this becomes a really attractive housing option. So the city's really trying to push it, and they're kind of doing this survey of all these different stats and stuff that I shared to like analyze, how can we improve the approval process or like streamline it further, right? And like what kind of things can we do to eliminate the number of like dwelling units or whatever, or like development charges, like all these different kind of things are on their radar as like, how can we stimulate this and stimulate it in the right way so that developers take action and actually provide units that the market wants. At a time when we just have a really big housing crisis still, like supply crisis, right? Yeah.
So you said stuff that the market wants. Did anybody talk about the uptake for these units at the conference, or was it just kind of understood that like when you build it, you're going to rent it?
Yeah, I think the secondary.
Like you'll find okay, yeah. There's no issues.
There was talk of like demand. The average rent is like $294 a square foot. Okay, well that's it's hard to even put that in context, but like there is buyers, tenants for these. For sure. So. Yeah, I think you're creating something that doesn't exist. There might be a little bit of hesitation from the general public, and that, like culturally speaking, right? If we're not used to, like we're used to our suburban sprawl, living in, a big box world, right? Where we just drive down the road to our big box store and drive back and put it all in our garage, and like, or we're, kind of living in a condo tower and like there's nothing in between. Then this is kind of a different lifestyle. People get used to it.
Yeah, interesting. A lot to think about there.
I don't know. Are you on board? You're the boomer. You don't like change, right? I'm the millennial. I guess.
Only bills, no change. So you're like the avocado toast guy,
Yeah.
and my generation's the margarine toast guys. That's going to be the new one. We're going to make fun of boomers and their margarine toast.
Advocating for margarine. Hey, underneath my avocados, I got a lot of butter, grass-fed butter. Oh,
to be
and
clear,
it's
I'm in favor of butter.
Okay.
Not plastic. The plastic stuff that is margarine.
Yeah, but it's so cheap.
I don't know. Is it? I haven't bought margarine, and I don't know if I ever bought it. But I know butter's not cheap. I mean, so we were talking about this earlier as well, like fertility rates, population trends, all that kind of stuff. And, people say like, well, I can't afford to have a big family because there's no housing. It's like, well, why is that? And, I don't buy that. I don't think, so this was my position. I don't think that housing determines fertility rates, because you just see it in general. I got to turn off my notifications here. You see in general in the Western world, fertility rates drop, and you can't there's not a single housing trend that defines the Western world, right? It's culture. It's culture that doesn't value children, I think. But I think you had the point that, it's sort of a, I don't know, self-inflicted cycle or whatever, because as less demand for bedrooms, let's say, there's less demand, then there's less supply, and then people find themselves like, oh, actually, it's really hard to find supply of 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom units, so maybe I won't have kids, right?
Yeah, or maybe not won't altogether, but they delay it further until they can afford such a home, and then at that point, it's too late. But it's not funny, but it's true, right? So we were asking the question, which came first, right? The housing units that are out there, or the culture around fertility and that trend going down. And so I'm reading Andy Crouch. The book is called Culture Making. So it's been a great book so far. I'm halfway. But he kind of makes the point that culture is not this ideology or this kind of thing, this belief. It's the tangible things that we create and do, and those things that we make. So if we make a house, that is culture, because what it does is a physical house actually affords the ability for someone to live in it. Okay, what can you do with the house? Well, you can live in it, right? Well, how many bedrooms are there? Well, how big are the bedrooms? And all those things impact your lifestyle, right? So if you have a house, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if you have a house with a garage, well, just the fact that you have a garage means you can have a car, or you can fill it with your junk. So now you got all this junk. Well, if everyone's got all this junk, we have a culture of consumerism and collecting stuff. And if we don't have, right? If you see different parts of the world where they just have a small space, in Europe, it's I'm a minimalist, minimal lifestyle, right? So because you don't have anywhere to put stuff, right? So it's which one came first, the desire to have no stuff and minimal lifestyle, or the fact that you don't have anywhere to put it, and you don't want to pay a storage locker. So in America, we have different culture and different physical reality that we have to work with, right?
Yeah.
So, and now we're trying to recreate. We're always trying to recreate that. We're trying to make it better. And maybe this is kind of my design background, just thinking about if you've got this existing infrastructure, this existing city, and this is where people want to be, how can you make it into something that, actually is appealing to families, so that people want to start a family because they want to see their kids running around in the backyard rather than running up and down the halls of a condo tower and pissing off all their neighbors. So one example was suburban sprawl, right? So this is an example of, we create spaces that reflect our values. So if suburban sprawl, hey, I value privacy, I value independence, I value the ability to just go and get a pizza whenever, hey, that's the infrastructure we create. But are things changing? I don't know.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you, again, just going from Europe to North America, right? And how we just have car-centric cities, right? It's all built for cars, right? Big, wide roads, malls with big parking lots, and as opposed to, the more typical European city where you just walk to get, your sort of daily needs, and then maybe you have a car, maybe you don't, right? And then, the richer areas where you've got the bigger homes, and which aren't really that big, but with the driveway and room for a car and that kind of thing. So it is interesting as we ponder, like, for myself anyways, sort of planting churches in cities, because the typical, I don't know, around people I know anyways, is kind of like, you'll start out in the starter home. And, I know that's changing for people, but you start out somewhere smaller, you have a bunch of kids, and then, eventually maybe you kind of move out to the country, right? Because you need a bigger house and you need more room for the kids to run around and play and stuff. And it's like, well, if we want to plant churches, like, you got to do it in cities, right? You're just not going to reach a lot of people planting, which is a problem too, because a lot of the churches in our circles are
move out to the country.
I mean, because people have land and they'll donate it, so that doesn't hurt. And land is expensive in the city, and this is what our church is going through right now. But we're trying to encourage, like, young families and people to, like, move into the neighborhood and stuff. But it's hard because
culturally they just don't want to be there or whatever, right? So it's sort of changing those mindsets, and even finding housing in certain areas that if you have 4 or 5 kids, like, it can be tough to cram into a small home. And I don't know, is that just a first world problem? Like, oh, it's so tough that I have to cram everybody into this beautiful winterized home with all the modern amenities and stuff. Like, woe is me, but that is the culture we live in, I guess, right? I know. It definitely, it's hard. Like, everyone needs the gospel, right? And how do you spread it? No, that's a whole nother conversation.
But I mean, no, it does, like, because we got to do an episode or a series on like fertility rates and family formation, and it's like do a deep dive into that. I'm very interested in that kind of thing, and like, how do, I don't know, because we often talk about, like, what can you do? Well, you can have kids, right? I mean, not everybody can, but if you can, have them and have a lot of them, and teach them to be a positive influence in the world, right? Even just culturally speaking, right? Bring up good kids, and then we don't need a million immigrants, right? We got a homegrown solution right here. You can grow them yourself.
It's like, what kind of households and communities are we making possible by the housing we build? And so one example I had recently, talking to one of our tenants, and they want to buy their first house, which is great, right? But they got kind of to the point where they're like, we're trying to save, we're looking at the market, we want to buy a house. That's kind of our ambition, right? But they can't save enough to get a down payment. So that they got to a certain point where they're like, look, like, this is just not happening. So therefore, why don't we just, like, not care anymore? Right.
Right.
So, like, their attitude kind of noticeably changed. Like, originally when they first kind of started renting with us and we met them, it was a lot of optimism and hope and excitement. And, like, this was a stepping stone towards, like, they're going to get a house. And then now it's like, 5-8 years later, they're like, that's faded, and the reality's setting in, and they're like a little bit, not even despair, but just like, they don't care, right? Like, this will happen if it happens, but it's not going to happen. So whatever. And, like, I'm just going to go and live my life and, like, just be a tenant. Right. So it's kind of sad to see that ambition and drive has gone away, because what that does, like, if everybody's like this, or like a huge portion of the population, whoever's tenants is like this, like, you can't put that drive into somebody so easily when the outcome that they want is so far away, right? So by creating policies like what Toronto's doing, this missing middle thing, to, like, provide options that maybe people in that situation could afford, or it's a stepping stone, right? So even one example is, like, you build a 5-unit property, and the tenant could move into this property and be a tenant, right? So they're still paying rent, but they might own, I did a little thumbs up. The thing does a thumbs up. But if, so they'd be a tenant in the property, but they might actually own, a small investment in the property as well.
Right.
So now they own, like they kind of invest in the project. So there's interesting like ways where they can build equity and still kind of have some ownership, some pride of ownership, right? Like maintain their unit of their property, part of the property. And it becomes a stepping stone, right? So if these options don't exist or they're not readily apparent to people, like I think they just throw up their hands and be like, whatever, I'm just going to spend my money. Like they do have excess money. They're just not going to save it. They're just going to spend it on whatever nonsense. And then, it's down the drain. So do we want do we want to cultivate a culture like that, or do we want to change it?
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if there's, I don't know, is rent to own going to make a comeback?
Yeah, actually it is.
Yeah.
I definitely seen more talk about it. And I mean, there's companies that do it all the time. So it's always there. But like in terms of like a really big kind of trend, I think definitely, so rent, like, I don't know if people are super familiar with rent to own because it's maybe not as talked about, but just the concept is you are a tenant, but you have an option to buy the house at a certain set agreed upon price in the future. Usually it's like 3 to 5 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you pay a deposit, like a larger deposit when you start renting, but at the end of the day, you're going to get your credit in order. You're going to save up the rest of the down payment. You're going to buy this thing. So it is a good way to actually start living in the house that you want to own one day, and you can start working on it if you want and improve it. There's a lot of advantages.
Yeah.
But usually why it doesn't work in some markets is like you have to agree upon this price, what you're going to sell. So as an investor, if you own the house and you've agreed to this tenant, you're going to sell it to them at a certain price. 3 years down the road, I'm going to sell this house to you for 5% more a year. Okay, great, right? And then 3 years comes by and the house price went up double, and you're like, oh man. So now the tenant, like, great deal, right? You just got a house that instantly made you 50 grand, 100 grand. I think during COVID, like that was like, if you're the investor and you're locking in at rates and you saw the prices shoot up, that's why it kind of lost popularity. Yeah. But yeah, it could definitely come
on
back.
The flip side, if prices go down, you win.
Yeah. And a lot of the times if the price goes down, like the tenant has the option to back out too, right? So it's an interesting strategy for tenants who are looking to buy. It's also an interesting strategy for investors who are looking to kind of, because some people don't want to be tenant or like landlords for long periods of time, or they want to kind of get their money to make money and kind of set the price that they're going to make to give them a little bit more security.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, I'm going to make this much. That's kind of agreed upon in the contract. And the worst case is I get my deposit from the tenant. Best case is we actually sell and close the deal, and the tenant's happy and we're happy. So,
best case, from people that I've talked to, is best case, the tenant gives you a hefty deposit
and then walks away.
You live there for 2 years and then they walk away.
Yeah.
And you get the next person in to
I would say that's probably taking advantage of people. So I like it, it's in the contract, but
I mean, you hope for it, but like that's up to the tenant. But I don't know. Maybe we should do an episode on rent down.
Yeah.
It's, I think you're right. It will probably make a comeback.
If the market is stable and price growth is like a little bit more predictable than, or moderate, and not like spiking up 20% a month, then maybe people will be making those 3 to 5 year commitments for selling their house. But So did we solve that issue, or?
So which issue?
The issue of whether culture creates housing or housing creates culture.
Or
family formations.
No, I mean, I lean towards more that the culture creates the housing.
Yeah.
And then there's a little bit of a reinforcement cycle in there, but
and there's a little bit of government printing money, and a little bit of fentanyl, and some tariffs.
It's all a rich tapestry, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a mess. But stewardship, Mark, stewardship. We have to steward through this. That's the other thing too. We can't just be like, it's a rich tapestry. I can't figure this out. It's not like, no, we have to know what's going on. We have to use it properly. We have a calling for sure. So.
Yeah. I don't know what that is right now. You look at the economy, look at housing, right? Things are not going well in Canada and will not go well for a while, I think. So,
my perspective is like housing is interesting because like everybody needs a house to live in, right? Yeah. So what can change? Well, so government policy can change some of the supply and demand, like, if immigration slows down or family formations slow down, but if like family formations can't go much lower before they start going back up, I don't know. And then, supply, like there's different variables that affect it. But at the end of the day, like we know they have to print more dollars, right? And they can't make houses very quickly. And regardless of what they say, 500,000 houses, like somebody has to pick up a hammer and build that thing. Right? There could be technology in 3D printing. I worked at 3D printing studio. They're not 3D printing houses. No. Definitely not the same quality and speed as what they can do in the regular construction industry. So like there's always going to be those constraints. I don't know, like you can speed it up by efficiency and there's definitely some methods with technology to kind of like make sure everything happens really quickly. But at the same time, like it still costs money. It still takes time. And it takes more time than printing more money. So,
yeah. I mean, that's true. And the money printing will lead to asset price inflation. But I think now it's like, especially important to have an asset that pencils, that like makes sense, right? We talked about that last time, I think, speculation versus investing.
Yeah.
So speculation is like, I'll buy it and the price will go up and I can always sell it. Right. And if it doesn't cash flow, like whatever. But now it's like, no, that thing better cash flow. Because if you got to hold on to it for 10 or 20 or 30 years and you don't have the option to sell it because you're underwater because the price dropped, at least if it's performing now, or if interest rates go up, what happens, right? Will I still have enough?
You can hold it and you can
I keep it?
Yeah. So this is the thing that's interesting is that's on the investment side, right? Like investors buying, and when we talk about stewarding, and I think it's even important for, just the regular person, first time home buyer, somebody buying another house, whatever, like kind of everything you do, you have to be strategic about it, right? Like, is there a way that you can generate income from the property? And I was talking about this to a client this morning, and like they're looking at a first time home, like low price, which is great because right now, like there's a buyer's market. There's a lot of lower priced things available, right? Versus 2 years ago. So that's great. Lots of opportunities to kind of pick from, but if they can find a way to generate some income, like their pro forma or the numbers on their property look so much better, right? Yeah. So they're renting right now. They're going to be homeowners. Their cost is going to go up like $900 a month in total. But if they can generate $200 by renting the garage or $300 by renting the garage, that's $300 a month, right? Like that, like if they can rent out their basement or whatever, right? So this is actually funny. He was talking about crash pads as a pilot. So like, he's a pilot. So he has a lot of his network who they call them crash pads, and they just like literally they don't have a kitchen, they just like literally have a bed and they can sleep. And so like it's kind of a network of, hey, I just need a place to stay. And so they pay a monthly fee or a per visit per bed fee. And if he knows who they are, like that could be a great avenue, right? Like tap into other things that you don't really I think I've heard of this with nurses as well, and like different opportunities there. Like kind of shorter term stays and stuff, but like there's creative ways to generate income from real estate and be strategic with it, even if it's like, just your first time house and whatever. So it's just setting yourself up for those sorts of things. Yeah. And then like, that's a stewardly decision, right? So this missing middle thing is probably a little bit, more for the investor who wants to actually deploy capital. It's a great opportunity, but, the way I see it is like, not your average person just going to be buying a 5-plex, right? So,
yeah, what was the new word you learned?
What was it called? A detached houseplex. That's what they're calling them. Yeah, I'm going to go into my detached houseplex. Yeah, basically, it looks like a house on the exterior, but it's actually
a whole bunch of units.
A whole bunch of units in the inside, right? So don't judge a book by its cover, Mark.
Don't judge a plex by its cover, okay? Oh, man. Well, it's probably a good spot to end off. Yeah. Words of wisdom. Truly, for our listeners. So, cool. Well, it's good.
Yeah.
I learned a few things, Brent.
I know. Including
houseplex.
So if anyone's looking for puppies, they give you a call?
Yeah. There's a couple available. So, 3/4 poodle, 1/4 schnauzer. Let me know. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you again next time. And until the next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.